Hello YouTube, it's American Airgun Hunter with Jim Chapman, and today I'm going to answer one of the questions that I get asked a lot, and that is, what do I like to hunt with an airgun? What are my favorite quarry? And I'm going to start a series of videos where I talk about each of the many different species that I like to hunt with my airguns and tell you a little bit about why. Today I'd like to start out talking about one of the species that is an all-time favorite, and that's the Javelina, also called the collared peccary. They also call them ranch rats, a little bit less complimentary, but they're a really unique game, and they're just perfect for hunting with an airgun, and I'll tell you why. These little 40 to 60 pound animals look like miniature Russian boars, but they're only remotely related to pigs. But I still call them pigs, most of us do. But they're not really a pig, and I know that before you start commenting, but we're going to use it for a shorthand. They're found in the scrub and desert areas of the Southwest through Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and the places where they exist, usually it's in pretty strong numbers. The populations are good. They do well in very arid areas where there's not a lot of human activity, but they also do pretty well around human activity if you've ever been to Scottsdale, Arizona. They also occur down south of the border, so from Mexico on down into South America, there are populations of Javelina. With respect to hunting, the laws differ state to state. You know, for many years there was nowhere in the U.S. that you could hunt Javelina. As a matter of fact, the first time I hunted them, I had to go down to Mexico to do it with an airgun. I'd hunted them before with firearms. The first time with an airgun, I had to go down to Mexico. And for years, I'd be hunting in Texas, and I'd be out for pigs down in South Texas, for instance. And I'd be sitting there waiting in a blind, or I'd be holed up somewhere, and I see animals coming in, and it was a squadron of Javelina, not pigs. And I just watched them, knowing I couldn't pull the trigger. It really became a grail animal for me, one that I couldn't hunt for a long time. But then a couple things happened. Arizona was the first. They changed the law to allow air guns for big game, and one of the big game was Javelina. So you could hunt Javelina in Arizona. And then, it was just a few years after that, a short time after that, Texas opened up, so you could hunt them in Texas as well. Now the laws are different. In Arizona, it's a tag. You've got to put in for a tag, a draw, early. There are some over-the-counter sold if there are anything left over after the draws, but it's one Javelina in a year, and mostly by draw. Texas, on the other hand, when you get your license, you're allowed to take up to 3 Javelina per year in Texas. Now the irony is, in Arizona there's a huge amount of public land, but you have to get a draw to get onto them to hunt the Javelina. Texas, on the other hand, where there is no draw and there are a lot of Javelina, there's almost no public land, so you have to know somebody with private property, or you have to do a trespass fee, or you have to do a guided hunt. And I've done all of those over the years. Mostly it's trespass fees when I can find them, but that's something hard to do. You got to really look around and do your homework to find those places, but you can. Now, Javelina travel either alone or in groups, and as I mentioned earlier, those groups are called squadrons. I didn't know that until a few years ago. So like bombers, a squadron of Javelinas coming through. That's the proper terminology. But they move throughout the day. Actually, I see them at night also, but mostly they're moving around before it gets real hot in the mornings and around dusk. And when the weather's cooler, though, I found them all through the day when I'm out looking. Now, Javelina don't really see very well. They hear pretty good, but their sense of smell is just out of this world. And I'd say 80% of my stocks that have been busted because the Javelina has winded me. You know, kind of the irony about the sense of smell is another popular name for these animals are stink pigs, and they have an aroma. They smell. As a matter of fact, sometimes in heavy bush when I'm stalking, I can smell them before I see or hear them. And they're still able to smell you over that, go figure. Says something about your 4th or 5th day out in the field that they can pick you up. But again, joking aside, they've got a really developed sense of smell. My favorite way to hunt Javelina is spot and stalk. That's actually my favorite way to hunt overall, but especially for Javelina. Now I approach this in a couple ways. Either I drive the ranch roads and I look around, I glass and look around as I'm driving. And a lot of times you'll see them moving across roads and down roads. They take the course of least resistance like most do, including humans. So you can find them moving along the road. Other times I'll hike up to a high perspective where I can sit and I can glass over a large area and try to pick up the movement of the pigs. And once I've located them, either way, then I strategize, I set up my approach. How am I going to get in close to them? Which ways are the wind blowing? Which way are they moving? Where can I work out and intercept? And that's part of the fun of this, is that you really have to be strategic in your thinking to get in. You don't have to be strategic. You can rely on luck. You can set up a blind. But if you're going to stalk them, it's that planning that gets to be such a cool part of it. And again, and I can't underscore this enough, the critical part of the hunt when you're doing this is to watch the wind. A lot of times where I hunt out in West Texas, the winds can be strong, but they're constantly shifting, swirling. You could have a great line at a pygmy moving in, spend 45 minutes, an hour to get into where you want, and then at the last minute have the wind switch and it's going completely from you to the pig. So you got to keep watching that and make adjustments along the way. Now, when this method doesn't pan out, another thing I'll do is to set up a blind or a hide. And I'll find a place along a pathway. A lot of times they'll travel through pretty consistent routes. It's not unusual to see them taking the same trail in the mornings or the evenings to get to food or get back to where they're bedding, whatever. So you can set up an ambush along the way. They don't need a great deal of water. I think most of their water they get from the food they eat, but they still will go down to water troughs and tanks on the ranch. So I'll sometimes set up along there as well. Also, a couple of the ranches I hunt have feeders for deer, and they also put out protein feeders, and those will draw in the pigs too. So sometimes I'll go to the feeder. Often I'll set up an ambush along the way if that's the approach I'm going to take. That makes it easier for filming because you're stationary, but again, my preference, and especially if I've got somebody with me filming, and one of my buddies, Chacho Gonzalez, comes down a lot with me to film, then I like to get out on foot and to move around. That is when it really comes alive for me. Now, I find that if the wind's in my favor, I don't really worry that much, and the wind has to be in your favor, but I don't worry that much about wearing camouflage. It doesn't hurt. I'll wear it sometimes, but mostly I count on staying in the shadows, using natural cover. Again, their sight's not real good, so I find that if I'm tucked into a bush, for instance, even if I'm not in camo, they won't see me if I hold still. They're much better at picking up motion than picking up patterns. So as long as I don't move, I'm pretty good that way. So I tend to not always wear camouflage, but to really work the shadows, definitely work the wind, and work the natural cover. Now, I use a lot of different guns for javelina, and you really don't need anything too big or too powerful, except that I do a lot of my hunting in Texas. And Texas game laws for air guns are great, but they're also very specific. To hunt a game animal in Texas, and remember, a javelina is a game animal, you have to be using a gun that's a minimum of a .30 caliber that is projecting a slug of over 150 grains. And it has to be generating at least 215 foot-pound of energy. So those are the criteria. So that really defines, at least in Texas, what guns I'm going to use. And I've got quite a few that I like to use. For example, I use the Recluse 357. That's been modified to get up to that 215 foot-pound. I use the Badger 41 caliber. I use the Hatson pile driver. I use the Air Force Texan in multiple calibers. All of those do very well. They hit that 215 foot-pound of energy threshold. And they're all really good guns to shoot. I enjoy all of them. And I've also used the Evanex Rainstorm and the sniper version of that, tactical version of that, in Arizona on a couple of hunts, because there I don't have the same constraints on the gun I can use. In terms of projectile in these guns, I like either a domed cast lead slug, or I like a hollow point. You know, Mr. Hollow Point, and some of the stuff I've shot more recently from NSA, Nielsen Specialty Ammo, been really good. It's worked really well for me. But I can go to a slightly lighter pellet. And as long as I get up over that 215 and the 30 caliber, I'm still good with that. So it has to be, that law is, it has to be a combination of those factors. The main one being the caliber and the energy output. My intention when I'm hunting javelina is to get inside of 50 yards. Yeah, sure, you could set up at 100 or 120 with a longer range rifle, but that's, to me anyway, that's not the objective. I hunt with air guns because I like to hunt. I want to get in close, and taking a long shot is challenging. You know, I think, and I don't want to put too much a point on it, but you can take a 100-yard shot on a javelina without having to work too hard. But if you're going to get into 50 yards, and depending on the conditions, it can be a real hunt. You have to work it to get into that distance. And you know, sometimes it's how you do things that becomes more important than the final outcome. And that again is one of the reasons that javelina is so high on my list. I prefer to use sticks when I hunt, and it's just because I want to get the best stability, but both because of the proximity and also the environment I'm hunting in. It's not always possible to use sticks, so I'd say probably half my shots, maybe more, are offhand. And the rest are using sticks, either sitting, usually kneeling, oftentimes standing. Kneeling, I don't use them as much because a lot of times I can get a really locked in solid position shooting off my knee. As long as the vegetation's not too high, as long as I have a shooting lane, that's actually one of my preferred, is kneeling and off the knee. For shot placement, I take headshots often, especially if it's denser and heavier brush. Because they'll often go down right on the spot with a headshot, but they'll also take a body shot and drop on the place a lot of times too, if it's perfectly placed. So I use both head and body shot. When you go after javelina and do it, your approach is to make a hunt out of it, to do the spot and stalk, and to really play the wind, play the landscape, the approach, and move in on the animal. It's like one of the most fun hunts that you can have with an air gun. To me, it is perfection for air gun hunting, and I really enjoy it. In terms of hunting, it is about as good as it gets with an air gun. And if you ever get a chance, or you want to get a grail hunt, that one hunt that you're gonna work for and you're gonna do a javelina. It's not going to cost you a lot of money, and it's going to be fun. So why are javelina one of my favorite species to hunt with an air gun? Well, it comes down to four factors. The animal's characteristics, the way they move, their defenses, and the way they react on a stock is just perfect again for air guns. The stock itself, it can be one of the best stocks. You know, sometimes I'm out there and I'll spend an hour and a half moving through this heavy bush, watching out for rattlesnakes, working my way through and trying not to get stabbed with cactus, watching the wind, moving in to get the shot. It's just it's a challenge, and it's really rewarding when you do it. The habitats, to me, some of the most beautiful places to hunt. I love the southwestern deserts, getting into those places. That same stuff I said, with all the cactus and the yuccas and everything that'll stick and stab you, and the rock formations, everything else. I love the terrain, the environment that you're hunting, and that kind of adds to the level of enjoyment of being out and on the hunt. And really what it comes down to is the fourth is the overall challenge. Again, you can make it easy. Like a lot of hunts, you can make it easier, you can make it harder. You make it hard, you're going to have a great hunt. So again, for years, I couldn't hunt javelina in the U.S., and it became almost an obsession to get out to do it. So they have a real special place for me, because so many years I wanted to hunt them and I couldn't, but now the opportunities are out there for most people. So I've taken several of them now, and I've had a lot of blown hunts as well. And you know, so if I look at the time I've been out there after javelina, it's been a lot of fun, but I remember every one of those hunts. They've been some of the best spotting stocks I've had. So anyway, if you like the video, you like this idea of going through some of my favorite hunts, please give it a thumbs up, give it a like, give me a comment, and when you share, it really helps me grow the channel, so I appreciate that. So keep coming back, and we'll see you next time.